guys, welcome back. Genesis 16 today. And let me tell you, this story, personally, I've always had a hard time with. I just don't like this account in the Bible. I shouldn't just say story because this is a real thing that happened, a piece of history here. But it gives us understanding to our day and age that we live in. And so that I am thankful for. I just don't like the events that happened. This has to do with Hagar and Sarai, Abram's wife. And, the Lord we just saw that the Lord had given Abram just like the 5 times already that I've seen, I'm going to do this great work. I'm going to do this great work. Well, God did not do his promise right away for Abram. There was a delay. And at this time, that they had been 10 years in Canaan. And I think that's interesting because, have you ever gotten a promise from God and then it just seems like forever to happen or forever to take place, or it's just there's a delay in it? And so Sarah gets frustrated and she goes impatient here and takes matters in her hands, and Abram kind of just goes with it. And because of that, just the Ishmaelite covenant comes about. And so now Sarah, Abram's wife, had bore no children. So she's heard, I'm sure Abram told him, God's going to do this, God's going to do this. And 10 years had gone by without seeing the evidence of this. And Sarah says to Abraham, she takes matters in her own hands. She wants to do it. Oh, hey, I'm not bearing. It's going to come through you, the Lord says. So maybe it's not me. I'm just going to give you my handmaiden Hagar. And where did Hagar come from? Hagar means flight. And on one of Abram's journeys to Egypt, he brought back Hagar. He brought back in the Bible, Egypt is a type of the world, and he brought back worldliness with him. And it's going to get in a point where it will always be a conflict for the Israelites here on after. And even to this day, we see the conflict between the Arab people and the Israelites. And it started back here. This is where it originated from. And so let's see what happens. So Sarai says to Abraham, take Hagar, her maiden, the Egyptian, and give her as Abraham to give her to her husband Abram to be his wife. And Abram had dwelt in the year 10 years in the land of Canaan. That's verse 3 of 16. And when she conceived, Hagar began to despise Sarai. So here she is, she's an Egyptian. She doesn't understand God and his cultures and the things that God is doing. She's worldly. She comes from Egypt. And here she gets pregnant, and she's been with Sarai, I don't know, has it been 10 years? I don't know, or longer. And she starts to despise Sarai. And so Sarai goes to Abraham, and look what she says. Women, we got to be careful how we talk to our husbands. Verse 5, my wrong be upon you. I gave my maid to your embrace, and when she saw that she had conceived, I became despised in her eyes. The Lord judge between you and me. She's upset. She started this whole thing. Sarai, you did it. You caused this situation to happen. And so Abraham sees just that and says, Sarai, do whatever you want with her. She's yours. And when Sarai heard this, she dealt harshly with her, so much so she was harsh with her that Hagar flees from her presence. So, you just think, why do we go to the flesh? Why do we always try to deal and work in the flesh when God has a plan? God had already told Abraham, I'm sorry, he's not been called Abraham yet, Abram, I'm going to do this amazing thing. He takes him out to see the stars, all this stuff. And then Sarah thought, well, maybe it's not me. I'm going to just give Hagar to her. And I'm just like, gosh, Lord, forgive us for trying to work out your work. Well, God is so gracious and God is so good. that he runs after Hagar, and he finds Hagar by a stream of water in the wilderness on the way to Shur. And it says that the Lord found her, and I thought, wow, Lord, you are a gracious God. And he said, Hagar, Sarah's maid. He qualifies her. You're Sarah's maid. I know who you are. Where are you come? Where are you going? And she said, I'm fleeing from the presence of my mistress Sarai. And the angel of the Lord told her, return and submit yourself to her hand. And she's probably going, what? I'm trying to get out of here. And, she gets an encounter with God here. And I love that about this situation. I don't like what Sarai did, but I love that even in the mistake, God is still showing up. And so, Abram kept hearing from God and but he kept seeing God and for this covenant, but I don't believe there's been any kind of like miracles that he saw God do. So, I'm sure he was having a hard time going, how is this going to come to pass? And we know now we have such strength and encouragement because we have the whole Bible, Old Testament, New Testament. We know God can walk on water. We know God can raise the dead, and back here at the start, Abraham hadn't seen that kind of stuff yet, so I think he was still trying to rationalize, how is this going to happen? And we're going to see that in the next chapter. Abraham's still wrestling with humanity of like, well, how is this going to be? But anyway, as a little tangent note, I'm so sorry. The angel says to her, so then the Lord not only says, go back and submit in verse 10, the angel of the Lord said, I will multiply your descendants exceedingly, so that they shall not be counted for multitude. So the Lord in this, he says, you know what? Ishmael is going to be born, and you're with child. You're going to call him Ishmael, which means God will hear. But listen to the kind of man he's going to be. He shall be a wild man, verse 12, and his hand shall be against every man, and every man's hand against him. And he shall dwell in the presence of his brethren. And I thought, oh, wonderful. So here you're going to have a child, and you're like, okay, the announcement, the baby. Yeah, well, he's going to be a wild man, and he's going to be against everybody, and everybody's going to be against him. And I'd be like, oh, great. What an announcement. But Ishmael is the line of the Arabian people, the Arabs, and you can see there's always conflict going on over in that land. So as true as the Lord says, he called it. And then what I love about Hagar at this time is that she called the name of the Lord who spoke to her. She said, Lord, you are the God who sees, verse 13. And she says, have I also here seen him who sees me? She had an encounter with God that here I have also seen him who has seen me. She experienced God, and God, is that an amazing thing that God revealed himself to her? Like here, she was just submitting into what Sarah and Abram wanted, and then, but she had her choice. She despised. She was being mean to Sarai, and Sarah then, had permission from Abraham, do whatever, so she was mean back. And, there's this war and this conflict here, and it doesn't stop because we see later on that Hagar gets kicked out again. She gets sent out, and this time for good. And so therefore the well was called Ber Laharoi, observed it between Kadesh and Beram. So Hagar obeyed, and she bore Abram a son, and Abram named his son whom she bore Ishmael. And Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore Ishmael to Abram. So he was 86 years old. So God, even in this, still has a plan. Now Ishmael goes on to have the 12 sons, very similar to that like Jacob did. And he has a nation that's going to be built up, and that's what the Lord says. This is going to happen. Jacob is the blessed line. Ishmael is not in the Abrahamic covenant, It's a separate thing that the Lord did. And, it was that of wildness and conflict and stuff. And what I love here, and I'm also reminded of, is God takes time to fulfill his word. You see, God was actually timing all these events perfectly. He needed Sarai and Abraham. He needed Isaac to be born the year that Isaac was to be born. That was on God's time continuum. But Abram and Sarah didn't know that. And then, so God had it all calculated. We saw back in the other chapter that the Lord had given Abram, hey, they're going to be in captivity for 400 years. God had already had all the time the people needed to be born, all the way up until even the time when Jesus was born to when Jesus died and rose again. All this is in perfect harmony with the order of God. And yes, Sarah and Abram got out of that order, but God has to make and mix it up and change it up, or, he already knew and was able to bring back into order what needed to happen. Well, it wasn't ever out of order. God just has to work with us humans and change some things around. But his will be established forever. And so the timing of the Lord, the next chapter we're going to see, 10 years had passed, Ishmael was born, then another 13 years goes by. 13 years. Guys, we're talking long delays of this promise, but we know it's because God had to have a specific order to set this stuff up. So just for you and I in our life, I always go, Lord, I don't see the answer and it's like, okay, it doesn't come in a day, it doesn't come in a week, it doesn't come in a month, it doesn't come in a year, it doesn't come after 10 years, but 24 years later, Abraham and Sarah received that promised gift of that child. And it's like, I wonder when he finally was born that they went, if we would have only trusted more, if we would have only just really rested in God's sovereignty, how we could have been. And, we're living in perilous times in today, and how much my heart needs to go back to. Let's rest in God's sovereignty. God has a specific time plan, and we are on it, and we just have to wait till that specific time for him to come back, to rapture us out, to get the great tribulation going and finished so that the millennial kingdom can happen, so the great white throne judgment can happen, and then for all eternity he can reveal his glory to us. So we're on a timeline. It's not a nebulous, this is just happening haphazardly. No, these are very specific things that God has already ordained from the beginning. From the beginning of creation, he's the Alpha and the Omega. He's the beginning and the end. He knows very well where we are today. We don't know quite well, just like Abraham and Sarah didn't know the timing of what they were in, but we see the signs of the time. We know we're living in the last of the last days. We're pushing there, with Israel just becoming a nation in 1948. I always go back to there. There's 72 years in 2020, and that the Lord said that generation will not pass away. So we're getting towards the latter times of this stuff. And so we can look up and be thankful for God's timing, and just know, you guys, that God is with us and he's got a plan. So continue to stay in this word, continue to let the Lord just richly bless you with his grace and his love. And we'll continue on of that was chapter 16, chapter 17 next time. All right, you guys have a great day.